Have you ever stood in the middle of a quiet house and wondered, how did I get here? Not just in the physical sense, but in that deeper emotional place where you've given your best years, your strength, your sacrifices, only to hear your grown child say, "I never asked to be born"? That sentence doesn't just sting, it echoes. It's not the kind of thing you ever expect to hear from the person you carried, fed, protected, cheered for at school events, stayed up with through fevers, and worried about even when they were grown enough to walk away. And now they throw a sentence at you that reduces your lifetime of love into something that sounds like a burden they never wanted. It cuts deeper than silence. It's not just hurtful, it's disrespectful and unfair. But it doesn't have to destroy you, because you're still here, and your story isn't over. You don't have to explain your love, defend your choices, or beg for appreciation. Instead, you can do something much stronger, not with yelling, guilt, or lectures, but with calm actions that speak louder than anything else. You can live in a way that shows them exactly what they lost when they stopped seeing you. And when they realize you've stopped chasing their approval and started living fully again, that's when they'll regret how they treated you. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. You see, the mistake most parents make after hearing something like that is they sink. They replay the sentence again and again. They try to make sense of it as if logic can explain cruelty. They ask themselves, did I do something wrong? Was I too strict? Did I expect too much? But those questions only trap you in a room with no doors. The truth is, you probably did everything you could, maybe even too much. And that's where the shift begins. It starts with remembering that their opinion, no matter how loud, is not your identity. Just because someone doesn't value you doesn't mean you've lost your value. You were a whole person before they were even born. You had dreams, passions, laughter. You had strength. That part of you didn't disappear. It just got buried under years of caring for others. Now it's time to uncover it again. And the first thing to do when someone throws that cold sentence at you is to stop trying to fix it. You don't need to explain why you became a parent. You don't owe anyone a breakdown of what love motivated you or how you stayed up all night during storms or emergencies. Their words don't deserve a debate. They deserve distance. Instead of explaining, just breathe. Let their words sit where they belong, outside of your heart. You are not their complaint. You are not their bitterness. You are a human being who has done what most people will never fully understand, raised a child into adulthood, often through your own storms. You don't need to argue, you need to rise. The second thing you can do is stop reaching out with desperation. That may sound cold, but it's actually a step toward peace. When you keep texting, calling, begging for attention or validation, you give away your power. You tell them, you're still the center of my world, even when you treat me like I don't exist. And that's not love, that's self-abandonment. Instead, imagine this. You go one full day without checking if they replied, then 2, then a week. And in that time, you begin doing small things for yourself. Maybe you take that walk around the block and smile at a neighbor you never talked to. Maybe you open a book you've been meaning to read. Maybe you plant a flower in your backyard just because you can. These aren't distractions. They are beginnings. Because here's what happens. When you start living without waiting, they notice. Maybe not today, maybe not for a while, but something shifts in them when the person they used to control with guilt is no longer standing there, holding the same space. You disappear. Not in anger, but in dignity. And dignity, my friend, is unforgettable. I once spoke to a woman in her late 60s who told me her son hadn't visited in over 2 years. Every birthday passed with a missed call, every holiday, an empty chair. But she didn't let it break her. She learned to paint, not professionally, just with joy. Her mornings became quiet, yes, but not empty. She filled her space with new colors, not old regrets. And guess what? One day, out of nowhere, her son showed up. Not because she called and begged, but because she stopped. He said, "You look different." And she replied, "I am." That's how you make them regret it, not with pain, but with progress. The third thing is a bit harder, but it's powerful. You stop apologizing for the past. Because let's be honest, most parents make mistakes. You may have yelled when you should have hugged. You may have worked too many hours or protected too fiercely, but no one handed you a manual on day one. You learned as you went, and the mistakes you made came from being human, not from being unloving. But if you let guilt sit in the driver's seat, it'll take you straight to nowhere. It'll have you doubting everything good you ever did. You'll find yourself saying, maybe they're right. But they're not. You did your best. And that is more than enough. If they want to blame you for their unhappiness, that's their path to walk, not yours to crawl through. You are not a villain because you had limits. You are not a failure because you weren't perfect. The real tragedy isn't that you made mistakes. It's that they can't see past them. But that's not your burden anymore. So when that sentence hits, "I never asked to be born," don't respond with tears or anger or even words. Respond with presence, with calm, with a quiet life that keeps moving forward, not waiting in place. You are still allowed to be joyful. You are still allowed to laugh, to discover, to be loved. Even if it's not by them, especially if it's not by them. The years you have now are not leftovers. They are still part of your story. And you get to decide how they're written. The kind of regret that matters most isn't the kind you force on someone. It's the kind that grows in them when they see that you didn't need them to shine. You just needed space to remember your own light. So now, as you take this all in, I want you to look around your life. Not at what's missing, but at what's possible. There's so much still ahead of you. So many ways to live that have nothing to do with being anyone's parent or being taken for granted. Let this be the day you step into that freedom, not out of revenge, but out of rediscovery. You didn't deserve those words, but you do deserve peace. And you're going to find it. There's a quiet shift that happens when you stop waiting for someone to value you and start valuing yourself. You don't need a dramatic goodbye or a final confrontation. Sometimes the most powerful moment is when you sit in silence, feel the pain, and say to yourself, "No more." Because after you've heard words like, "I never asked to be born," you realize this isn't just about what they said, it's about the pattern. The years of being taken for granted, the one-way conversations, the invisible labor you gave with a full heart and got silence in return. That sentence may have been the last straw, but the pile has been building for a long time. So what now? Now you start taking your peace back, one decision at a time. You stop trying to prove that you were a good parent and start showing yourself that you're still a whole person. You begin to live again, not to make them feel guilty, not to make them notice, but because you deserve a life that feels like yours, not one that's just a waiting room for their next apology. Let me tell you something simple and real. The most heartbreaking part of being ignored isn't the silence. It's how quickly you begin to believe you deserve it. That's how emotional dependency creeps in. You wake up wondering, if today's the day they'll call. You hesitate before doing anything for yourself because maybe, just maybe, they'll reach out and need you. And so you wait. And in that waiting, you slowly disappear from your own life. But you don't have to do that anymore. You're not here to beg for crumbs of attention. You're here to rebuild a life that belongs to you. It starts by removing your emotions from their behavior. That's not easy, especially when the person is your own child. But the truth is, the moment your joy is tied to whether or not they remember you, you've handed them, the key to your emotional world. And that's a key they often don't even know they're holding. You don't have to stop loving them, but you do have to stop depending on them to feel loved. That's where your freedom begins. There's something beautiful about emotional independence. It's not about isolation. It's about reclaiming your right to feel good without needing someone else to give you permission. You get to wake up and decide, today, I'm doing something that brings me peace. Even if it's just watering your plants, or walking around the block, or calling a neighbor just to say hi. And if you think that sounds small, it's not. It's revolutionary. Because every time you make a choice that centers you instead of them, you're building a new life. One that they can't take away with one careless comment or a missed birthday. A life that stands strong on its own. Let me share something with you. I once met a man who hadn't heard from his grown son in over a year. No calls, no visits, not even a card on Father's Day. He had been a devoted dad, worked double shifts, coached his son's little league games, saved every extra dollar for his college tuition. And now, nothing. But one day, instead of sitting by the phone, he drove to a nearby lake, rented a kayak, and paddled out under the wide open sky. He said it was the first time in months he could breathe deeply. That moment, surrounded by water and silence, was the beginning of his healing. Because he wasn't waiting anymore. He was living. And when his son finally called months later, he didn't pick up out of desperation. He picked up from a place of calm. You don't have to kayak, but you do need your own lake. Your own space, your own version of peace. Because when your peace doesn't depend on anyone else, it becomes permanent. It becomes untouchable. Here's something else worth remembering. People begin to pay attention when you stop chasing them. Not because you're playing games, but because absence has a way of revealing presence. When you stop texting first, stop calling to check in, stop asking if they need anything, they notice. And what they often feel, for the first time, is the weight of your absence. That's not manipulation, that's balance. For so long, you've filled the space. You've been the one holding the relationship together. You've covered the distance. You've forgiven the forgetfulness. You've kept the door open. Now it's time to sit inside your own house and let the door stay closed for a while. Because if someone truly wants to be in your life, they'll knock. They'll try. They'll reach out. And if they don't, that tells you something too. Here's the thing. Love that has to beg is no longer love. It's fear. It's habit. It's guilt. And you've lived enough life to know the difference. So the next time you hear that voice in your head saying, maybe I should reach out again, ask yourself why. Are you reaching out to give or to get? To connect or to soothe the ache of being forgotten? If it's the latter, pause. Let that moment pass. And give that love to yourself instead. You've earned it. Maybe you take yourself to lunch. Maybe you finally try that dance class you always wondered about. Maybe you go sit in the sun and feel it warm your face. Whatever you choose, do it because you are worth showing up for. And let me say this plainly. They may never say they're sorry. They may never realize how much they hurt you. But that's okay. Their apology is not your fuel. Your life is. One day they might come back. They might say, "You've changed," or "You seem different." And they'll be right. But it won't be because you were waiting. It'll be because you stopped. And the regret they feel, if they feel it, won't be because you made them feel bad. It'll be because you made yourself whole again without them. That's how you live with quiet power. That's how you take your dignity back. That's how you remind the world and yourself that your value never left. It was just buried under the noise of everyone else's needs. But now, it's rising. And so are you. Sometimes, after all the heartbreak, after all the confusion, there comes a strange kind of stillness. It's the moment you realize, not just in your head but deep in your chest, that words won't change them, that waiting won't bring them back, that you've said all you could, done all you knew how, and now, the next move is yours and yours alone. This is where real strength is born, not the kind that stomps its feet or yells to be heard, but the kind that stands quietly, calmly, and says, I am done performing, I'm done proving, I'm done pouring from a cup that's long been empty. You don't need to tell anyone this. You don't need to make a grand announcement. True change doesn't always need an audience. It just needs truth. And the truth is, when you stop chasing, you change the entire energy of the relationship. You stop being the one who bends and starts being the one who stands. You stop being the person waiting to be chosen and start being the person choosing yourself. And that, my friend, is when people start noticing. They notice when the usual text doesn't come, when the holiday goes by and the card they expected to receive, the one you always sent, even when they forgot yours, doesn't arrive. They notice when your voice isn't in their voicemail, when your quiet presence, once always available, now holds its distance. And it makes them uncomfortable. Not because you're trying to punish them, but because they're finally feeling what it's like to exist without your emotional labor, without your effort keeping the bond alive. And in that silence, they have to reckon with what they've lost and what they took for granted. But here's the beauty. While they're finally waking up to your worth, you're rediscovering it for yourself. There is nothing more powerful than someone who used to shrink, finally taking up space. Nothing more beautiful than a person who used to ache for love, learning to give it to themselves without condition. I once spoke with a grandmother who used to drop everything, even in pain, to help her adult children. Babysitting, cooking, lending money that was never returned. She did it because that's what mothers do, even when it hurt. But there came a moment after hearing one too many careless comments when she looked at her calendar and realized she had nothing planned that was just for her, not one thing. So she picked one small thing, a pottery class. She was nervous. She didn't know anyone, but she went. Then she went again. Then she started making friends, not as mom or grandma, but as herself. Months passed and she found herself laughing again, a real deep laugh. The kind that doesn't ask permission. And her kids, they noticed. They began to say things like, "You're busy a lot lately," or "You seem different." And they were right. She was. She had finally stopped putting herself last. And that change and that refusal to keep bending didn't just earn respect. It reclaimed her life. So here's the next step in this journey. Start saying no, not as a weapon, but as a boundary. You don't have to explain. You don't have to justify. You are allowed to say no simply because you want to, because your energy is sacred, because your time matters, and because constantly sacrificing your well-being doesn't make you a better parent. It makes you a burned-out one. You've spent decades doing for others. Now, let yourself do for you. Say no when you're tired. Say no when the request is laced with entitlement. Say no when the love feels one-sided. And say yes to rest, to joy, to adventure, to peace. There's a common fear that if you stop saying yes, they'll pull away completely. But here's the thing. If your connection depends entirely on your compliance, it's not a connection, it's a transaction. And you're not a service, you're a soul. It might feel awkward at first, you might feel selfish. That's the conditioning talking. That voice inside saying, if I don't give, they won't love me. But that voice is wrong. You are not loved because you give everything. You are loved when you are you, whole, strong, and real. And if someone can't accept that version of you, let them go. The right people, the ones who truly love you, will come closer when you are honest about your limits, not further away. They will respect the no, not punish it. And if they don't, that tells you everything you need to know. So what's next? Now you turn toward joy. Yes, joy, you've grieved, you've cried, you've questioned everything, but you've survived. And now you get to live. Not in the shadow of what your kids said, not under the weight of their rejection, but in the light of your own becoming. Start something you've put off for years. Learn a new skill, join a group, adopt a hobby, plan a trip, even if it's just to the next town over. Write your story not as a tragedy, but as a comeback. Because that's exactly what this is. You're not too old, you're not too late, you're just getting started. And when your child, the one who once said they never asked to be born, sees the person you've become, confident, joyful, at peace, they'll feel it. Maybe not with words, maybe not right away, but deep down, they'll know they were wrong to dismiss you. Because the real regret doesn't come when someone yells. It comes when someone thrives. And that's exactly what you're doing. You are thriving. On your terms, in your time, without needing permission. And the world, including those who once ignored you, won't be able to look away. Because your silence has become your strength. Your boundaries have become your beauty. And your life? It's finally yours again. You've come a long way already. From that first painful moment when they threw those words at you, "I never asked to be born," to the silence that followed, to the rebuilding of your own life without waiting on theirs. But now comes something even more powerful than growth. Now comes freedom. It starts when you stop apologizing for being happy without them. That's right, you're allowed to be happy. You don't need to look over your shoulder or feel guilty for smiling again. You've given enough. You've cried enough. Now it's your time to laugh without explanation, to live without tiptoeing around someone else's mood swings or emotional distance. For years, you've been the one holding space, keeping the door open, making excuses for their coldness. You've said things like, "They're just busy," or "Maybe they'll come around." And maybe they will. But whether they do or don't, your life can't stay on pause. You're not a backup plan. You're not a side note. You are the main character in your own story, again. One of the most overlooked truths in life is this: joy is the best form of strength. There is something incredibly dignified about a person who refuses to be bitter, who could be, but chooses peace. That choice? That's power. That's what people don't expect after they've dismissed you. They expect you to beg, to break, to fade. But when you don't, when you rise instead, that's what stays with them. That's what makes them regret it. Because suddenly they're no longer the center of your emotional world. You are. And when that happens, the imbalance they depended on disappears. So the question becomes, what does joy look like for you now? Not as a parent, not as someone proving their worth, but simply as a person. It might look like sleeping in on your own schedule, or taking your time in the garden without rushing. It might be as simple as finally repainting the guest room in that color you've always liked, but never bothered with. Maybe it's joining a small group at your local library, or signing up for something creative, like quilting or storytelling or hiking, even if it scares you a little. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone to say, "You've earned this." You've already earned it. Now, it's time to enjoy it. And as you lean into that joy, something else happens. Something subtle but strong. You stop fearing silence. You stop dreading that quiet phone. You stop tying your mood to whether someone thinks of you that day. You stop needing their attention like a life raft. And when you do, you rise like a lighthouse. Let me be clear, this isn't about revenge. It's not about playing games or hoping they feel bad. It's about becoming untouchable. It's about building a life so full, so rich, that their absence doesn't echo anymore. Because you've filled that space with people, and things that matter, with peace, with dignity, with days that are yours again. I once met a man in his early 70s who spent years waiting for his children to visit. Holidays passed, birthdays. Even the day his wife passed away, they sent a card instead of showing up. He was devastated. But one morning, he got up, made a cup of coffee, and decided he wasn't going to wait anymore. He didn't make an announcement. He just started living. He bought a bike, not because he planned to race, just to ride. He started having lunch at the same park every Wednesday, where he met others doing the same. He picked up woodworking again, something he hadn't done since his 20s. And slowly something returned to his eyes, a light, a sense of being home inside himself. One day, out of nowhere, one of his kids called. "Are you okay?" they asked. "You've been so quiet." And all he said was, "I'm well, just busy. No guilt, no drama, just peace. That's what you're after now. Not attention, not apologies, just the kind of life that makes you look in the mirror and smile again. The kind where you're not waiting for anyone to validate who you are. Because here's a hard truth wrapped in freedom. You may never get the apology you deserve. They may never say, 'I'm sorry I hurt you.' They may never take back the words that pierced your heart. But that doesn't mean you have to stay wounded. You get to heal anyway. You get to walk anyway. You get to enjoy your days. Not because they remembered you, but because you remembered yourself. And if they do come back one day, let them meet the version of you that's no longer waiting. Let them see that you've changed, not out of spite, but out of wisdom. Let them feel the difference between the parent who used to plead and the person who now lives with peace in their pocket. You don't need to slam the door. Just stop holding it open so long that the cold gets in. And if they don't come back, you'll still be standing, you'll still be smiling, you'll still be living. That's the kind of ending or beginning you can be proud of. Because regret doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it comes in the quiet moments, when they remember your laugh and realize they haven't heard it in a long time. When they need comfort and realize the person who used to drop everything is no longer on call. When they scroll through old photos and see the face of someone they once dismissed, now thriving without them. That's the moment they'll feel it. And you? You'll be too busy living to notice. You have this one life. However many years are left, they are yours. Not to spend proving your worth, but to enjoy it. Not to carry old wounds, but to create new joy. Not to beg for love, but to live it. In every breath you take, every choice you make, every day you refuse to let bitterness win. So stand up, straighten your back, take a deep breath. Your past may have been heavy, but your future doesn't have to be. Let this be the moment where you say, enough. Enough waiting, enough guilt, enough shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. You didn't choose to be treated that way, but you do get to choose how you rise from it, and you will, because you already are. There comes a point when you've cried your last tear over someone who doesn't see you, when the silence you once feared becomes a shield instead of a wound, and the life you once put on hold, waiting for an apology, a phone call, a thank you that never came, finally begins moving forward again without permission. That's where you are now. You've let go of chasing. You've begun living again, not just surviving. You've stopped explaining yourself to people who've already made up their minds, and you've learned to protect your peace like the sacred thing it is. But there's one final piece, something that completes the transformation and truly seals the shift. You stop waiting for time to change things. You start changing things with the time you have. Because waiting is its own kind of prison. Waiting for them to grow up, wake up, see the light, remember your sacrifices, it robs you of now. And the truth is, time doesn't wait for regret to settle in. It just keeps moving. So what do? You live. not in the background of someone else's life, not as a second thought, not as the always available parent who never had space to become anything else. You live like someone who remembers they still matter. You start walking again, even if your knees aren't what they used to be. You sign up for that painting class, even if you've never held a brush. You call that neighbor you always meant to talk to. You dance in your kitchen to music no one else hears. You try new foods. You let yourself laugh, really laugh, without wondering if it makes you look foolish. And you let the joy come in. Because the greatest regret your children may ever feel isn't that you stopped calling. It's that when they finally turn to look back, they found you living a life they were never part of, not out of anger, but because you simply stopped waiting. They'll remember how you used to be the one who held it all together. And now, they'll see you becoming someone who doesn't need to anymore. It may take months, it may take years, but one day, that moment will come. A holiday will roll around, and they'll expect your message, and it won't be there. They'll look at old photos and realize the smile they remember is now posted online, in a picture of you with new friends, doing something they never imagined you'd try. They'll sit in the silence they once created, and they'll miss the sound of your presence. That's when they'll regret it. Not because you made them feel guilty, but because you made peace without them. You see, people expect anger. They expect drama, but they never expect peace. Peace is what stuns them. Peace is what makes them pause. Peace is what makes them reflect. So if your child ever said to you, "I never asked to be born," you don't need to fight back with words. You fight back by becoming someone they can't ignore. Not because you chase them, but because you don't. Because your life now glows in a way they never expected. Because your happiness no longer depends on their presence or their approval. And no matter what they think or say or do next, they'll remember how you didn't fall apart, how you didn't disappear, how you didn't cling. You rose, you thrived, you lived. And that, more than anything else, will stay with them. Let them wonder how you're smiling again. Let them question how you moved on. Let them feel the distance they created, not as a punishment, but as a natural result of their own choices. You didn't choose to be disrespected, but you can choose to rise from it. You didn't choose to be forgotten, but you can choose to become unforgettable. You didn't ask for their bitterness, but you can choose joy in spite of it. This isn't about revenge. This is about renewal. This is about stepping out of their shadow and into your own light. This is about becoming the person you were always meant to be, whole, strong, independent. Not because they loved you, but because you finally started loving yourself again. You have the right to peace. You have the right to boundaries. You have the right to joy. And you have the right to spend the rest of your years as fully and freely as you choose, without apology, without fear, and without waiting. So if your kid said they never asked to be born, you don't have to carry the weight of that cruelty. Let them sit with their words. You're too busy living. Because the best way to make someone regret underestimating you is to become someone they never saw coming. You're not broken. You're becoming. And that journey is far from over. Now take that breath, lift your head, and keep walking, not for them, but for you. Because this is your time, and you're just getting started.